So in order for you to successfully analyze the data you're going to gather on measuring skulls, you need to understand the evidence behind the theory of descent with modification. Today we're going to explore the evidence that all life shares a common ancestor. So Charles Darwin in the 1850s traveled through the world on a boat, collecting plants, animals, and fossils, and sending those specimens back to England. Well, when he got back, he wrote a book called The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. And he talked about descent with modification and how essentially, over a long period of time, changes or modifications are made that allow a species to better survive in their environment. Darwin's theory basically states that in nature, there are different levels of success in reproduction based on the ability to survive in that environment. So if we look at this picture, we see over time the different species of elephants that have existed. So we see that some were not as successful, like the mammoth, and some are also extinct that are the ancestors of all of these organisms, including the living African and Asian elephants. So survival of the fittest may not necessarily mean strength. Organisms can survive without being strong. Like these African and Asian elephants, they're just naked. They don't have as much fur, so they're able to survive. So those traits are beneficial, and they allow them to survive and reproduce under the harsh conditions of their environment. So remember, a population evolves, not individuals. So our population of bison, when they breed with other bison and share variation of traits, they might evolve due to new environmental conditions. And same thing happens with our flowers and with our fish and with our swans. Or those flamingos. I think those are flamingos. So life is rough, and nature gets to decide who survives and who doesn't. Darwin read this guy Malthus's book. It essentially said that life is a struggle to exist. There's only a certain number of resources that are there, and sometimes we birth too many offspring to survive. So when those 2 points meet, some organisms die off. And those that have more advantageous traits that help it to survive are going to be able to pass on their genes to the next generation. Okay, I get natural selection, survival of the fittest, blah, blah, blah. What is the evidence? Well, this is a short list of the different pieces of evidence we will be exploring in this PowerPoint. Homologous structures. These are structures that are the same between organisms. So we can look at skeletons of humans, cats, whales, and bats and see that we have very similar bone structure. And this is one line of evidence that's really strong with vertebrates, so animals that have backbones. You can see their fingers and their toes and their fibia and their tibia are all in the same order. Embryos. They're developing organisms. So for humans, that means this is happening in the womb. For birds and lizards, it's happening in eggs. It's a crucial time in an organism's life, and they need to be able to develop properly in order to survive. Let's look at this top row. What do you notice? Pretty similar, huh? Well, these embryos develop into everything from fish to chickens to humans. So this shows us that there are similarities or homologies in embryos. That these stages are so important that they existed throughout evolutionary time. So since Darwin's day, we've found some more evidence for evolution. And one of the best tools we've been able to discover since his day was DNA. So we've been able to see molecular homologies or DNA similarities. We can compare species like humans and monkeys and mice and chickens based on the DNA sequences that they have. So in this chart, we're looking at the gene for hemoglobin, which is a protein that carries oxygen, and how different these organisms are from each other. So from humans to monkeys, there's only 8 differences. Between mice and humans, there's only 27 differences. So we can use these DNA similarities to see how distantly related we are to other organisms. Biogeography essentially means where that organism's found. So sugar gliders in Australia, flying squirrels in North America. And sometimes when we see things like sugar gliders and flying squirrels, we think, oh, they must be related. They both have these weird little flappy things that help them fly. When in actuality, they've experienced what's called convergent evolution. So they're distant cousins, yes, but they developed flaps independently of each other. They just happened to have random mutations that led to the development of flaps that allowed them to survive. The conditions in which they lived must have been pretty similar. Analogous structures have the same function. So a bat wing, a bird wing, and an insect, those structures are all used to fly. But don't confuse it with homologous structures. Homologous structures are the same, such as the bones in whales, bats, humans, whereas analogous just means similar. They have the same function, but it doesn't show common ancestry like homologous does. Homologous structures show common ancestry. I think one of the coolest pieces of evidence for evolution is vestigial structures. So these are organs that we don't need anymore, and our body slowly loses them over time. So wisdom teeth. There's no space in our mouth for them. Why do we have them? Well, our ancestors had larger mouths that allowed them to fit all those teeth. And humans typically died before they really had to worry about wisdom teeth a couple thousand years ago. So why bother? And goosebumps. Goosebumps help hair on mammals stand up so they look bigger for predators. All they do for us is tell people that we're cold. Fossil evidence also supports the theory of natural selection by displaying common structures between species. The fossil record is incomplete because of how fossils are formed. They're only formed under certain conditions, and a lot of them are still buried under the dirt or under some body of water. But in this project, you're going to look at the fossil evidence for how closely related hominid species are, at least the ones that we've discovered.